Ah, got him every time, all right? Every time. Now, really quick. Welcome back, Honors. All right, so big thing going forward. Already started grading a bunch of y'all's tests. Already started getting after it, and needless to say, mind blown by how well y'all prepared, how well y'all crushed it, how well y'all turned kind of your stoic intensity in class into, I guess we'll call it enthusiasm for the material, because y'all were murdering that thing. It was ridiculous, left and right. I'm like, A. So, and it makes me feel a little bit sad. Maybe my tests aren't hard enough, all right? But it's okay. It's okay. You know what I mean? I'm impressed by y'all. Needless to say, I'm very proud of all y'all, right? And when I get everything graded, I'll have your names up on my little academic or my honors studs board for all the kids that got A's, and then I'll bring some candy and stuff and blah 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 blah. But anyway, big thing is we now got to get into our next unit, right? So now we're introducing our next unit, right? And what that next unit is going to be is one that a lot of y'all are probably a little bit more comfortable with, right? We're going to now be getting into the ancient Greeks, right? Some of y'all have already had Greek mythology in your English classes. Some of y'all have already had, or probably already have, learned some forms of ancient Greek history. Now, the big thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to be diving a lot deeper, right? A lot of y'all are kind of coming into class probably with the prior knowledge of oh, well, they had columns and gods and goddesses and stuff, and I think I know where Greece is, but I'm not positive. Now, after that map quiz, you should definitely know where Greece is, right? So really quickly, though, hold up. Let's pull it on back. Let's pull it on back. Back up, Terry. Back up. All right, now, big thing we need to understand really quick before we get started is that how many time periods there are in ancient Greece, right? Just like when we looked at ancient Egypt, we talked about the ancient Egyptian time periods, right? Sorry, I'm looking for a marker. We talked about the ancient Egyptian time periods. So, now, big reason why talking about time periods is so important, ignore the theory of forms. Big reason why time periods are so flippin' important is due to the fact that it helps us periodize and synthesize information and historical actualities that actually occurred during these ancient civilizations over a long period of time, right? Now, ironically enough, Americans are kind of not as well vested in understanding time periods as maybe some of the other cultures in the world. And a lot of this is due to the fact that we're still a very young civilization, right? The American culture is still only about, give or take, 1776? It's 2020. It's not even 300 years old yet, right? It's 250-ish, right? 250 and change. Now, the big thing about it, though, is we don't have to really subset our time periods just quite yet, because we might actually be considered by most civilizations to still be in our first one, right? Now, going forward, though, ancient Greece has, count them, 8 time periods, right? We got 8 ancient Greek time periods, okay? So notice I got 8 time periods. What I want you to do to start this next unit out, in your notes, right, definitely start on a nice, fresh, blank slice of paper. Is that bothering you too, Brooke, that I said a slice of paper? So now, getting into it, though, on this piece of paper, you can go ahead and put Unit 2, Ancient Greeks, right? Go something like that, right? So Unit 2, Ancient Greeks. And also, let's get a little. All right, so now, got Unit 2, the Ancient Greeks, right? 8 time periods. What I want you to do, and you can organize these going this way, you can organize them going that way. It's really up to you, right? But there are 8 Greek time periods. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write up here just their first letters, all right? So it'll be an N, an E, and a B, an M, an M, a D, an A, a C, and an H, right? So these are the first letters of all of the ancient Greek time periods, right? I'll go over a couple of these in a darker blue also, which is actually kind of super convenient for y'all, because this also is going to be broken down into 2 separate time periods as well within these time periods. It's like time periods within time periods. It's like Inception. Now, the big thing about it, though, is some of you are like, well, how the heck am I going to learn all of these 8 Greek time periods? This is ridiculous. Well, because we're going to move through each of them individually, right? Because we have the Neolithic, Early Bronze, Minoan, Mycenaean, Dark Ages, Archaic, Classical, Hellenistic, right? I'll do it again real quick. Neolithic, Early Bronze, Minoan, Mycenaean, Dark Ages, Archaic, Classical, Hellenistic. Now, some of y'all are probably telling yourself, you're like, maybe I should just go back and slow them down real quick. We are going to go over each of them individually in class tomorrow. I'm going to give you a mnemonic device to remember them and stuff like that, so really don't stress yourself out, but this will just kind of serve as like a table of contents for your notes for this unit, right? So, but the big thing is one of them that you definitely picked up on, right, was the Neolithic period. But before we can even get to the Neolithic period, we kind of got to understand like where Greece is, the geography that affects that region of the world, and kind of understand why Greece was like the preeminent first numero uno Western civilization, and how they kind of broke the mold for all civilizations that had come before them. Because all the civilizations that came before them, we all talked about river valleys, Tigris, Euphrates, and then like the Fertile Crescent area, and then Persia, and then like the Zagros Mountains for the Assyrians, and these geological things that allowed them to do one key thing much better, which is agriculture, right? But before we get into the agricultural difficulties of the ancient Greeks, for a second we got to kind of back up, right? And we got to figure out where it is. So if we're looking at a map of the world right now, we know for a fact it's going to be towards the Mediterranean, right? And the Mediterranean Sea is located right here, right? So the Mediterranean Sea is a very, very key important location. And so we know it's going to be in this general region. Well, we know for a fact Greece is not in North Africa. We can deduce from that we believe that it's in Europe, right? So we're thinking that it's somewhere around this area, the biggest and dumbest continent that's ever existed, all things considered, when you think about it, because it's not even a continent at all. Like, literally, it's connected to Asia. Now, big thing going forward, though, who thinks they know where it is? Anybody? Heck, yes, Ashley, Reach. Very, very nice, Reach. It's right there. You're exactly right. You're so awesome with your Philly soft pretzel mask that you wear all the time, right? It is located right here in an area known as the Balkans, right? Go ahead and jot that down. It is in the Balkan region of Europe, right? This whole area right here is known as the Balkan region of Europe, right? So the Balkans is going to be home to the very, very first Western civilization, located mostly, and a little bit, located mostly right there, right? Now, taking another stab at Greece really quick, so now we're going ahead and just kind of take a little quick look at it. Right now, some of y'all are immediately looking at this thing, and I can already hear some of y'all's brains are turning, and I hear Julia right now being like, is that a hurricane? No, it's not a hurricane, actually. This is a topographical map of Greece, right? Topographical. What do you think topographical means? Topographical is a map, or topography is the study and measurement of elevation, right? So if we're looking at this picture of Greece in the Balkan region of Europe, and by the way, Balkan is spelled B-A-L-K-A-N, Balkans, the Balkans. It's a very important region. It comes up multiple times throughout the course, usually because they get taken over by like multiple different empires, the Austro-Hungarians and the Ottomans, and then they're a major key region in the First World War. So you do need to know where the Balkans are. But again, backing it up, right, Julia's question, what the heck is this hurricane map doing up here? It's not a hurricane map. It is the topographical map of Greece, measurements of elevation. So by taking a quick gander at this map, somebody tell me really quickly, what can we already deduce about the geography of ancient Greece before we go any further? And I can already hear Rachel just screaming bloody murder right now, right? Rachel's freaking out. She's jumping up and down like she always does in this class, and she's like, ah, right? So the Balkan region of Europe, that particular area of Europe, especially Greece, is covered in mountains, right? Good job, Rachel. Good job. Very impressed, right? So the big thing going forward, though, is that they are covered. Okay, stop it. You don't have to be this way. All right, there we go. They are covered in mountains, right? So getting into Greece's geography a little bit. They are extremely mountainous, right? Which is going to divide a lot of the earliest settlements, okay? Now, causing each city-state to be very, very unique. What I need you to do for me really, really quickly, though, is I need you to write a key component word, right? Wait. Is it geographic? Yeah, geographic, right? Underneath mountainous, right? Geographic, Geographic. And then next to that, put isolation, all right? I-S-O-L-A-T-I-O-N, right? So geographic isolation is going to play a very key important part in ancient Greek culture, especially the growth of archaic Greek culture, but also even in their earliest time periods. The geographic isolation concept is going to cause city-states, individual places in ancient Greece to be very unique from one another, right? So whenever you're looking at the two major Greek states, you're talking usually about two key ones, Athens and Sparta. Now, here's the thing. They're from the archaic slash classical slash Hellenistic period. They're from the last 3 time periods, right? But even if you were to go further back and talk about the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, all of these communities and all of these city-states and all of these civilizations are very unique from one another. When we get into it, you'll be looking at how the Minoans were producing art while the Mycenaeans were producing armor. We'll be talking about how the Minoans were building kenosis while the Mycenaeans were building a military stronghold known as Mycenaea. They're not very creative. Now, but that geographic isolation key component was they were divided by these different geographic boundaries, right? The Mycenaeans and the Minoans, the Athenians and the Spartans, they were divided by things like mountains or the Aegean Sea. And since they didn't come into contact with each other early on in their development, it's going to cause that uniqueness, right? Like, for example, imagine for a hot second if it was like me and and Mr. Roddy, all right? If any of y'all have Mr. Roddy, you know who Mr. Roddy is. Or if you were to say me and Mr. Mathern, or somebody that's just a heck of a lot different from me, like in personality, right? A lot of it might be due to the fact that we're just so far away from each other at school, right? We are geographically isolated from each other, right? I'm all the way over here in the Fine Arts Building, which is over in like East Asia, it feels like, because we're so far away, and I'm over here being weird and all this other stuff, and you need a passport to get in my building, while the other guys, Mr. Roddy, Mr. Mathern, are over on the other side of the building, kind of being very different from me, right? Because we were allowed to grow up individually, right? And speaking of another geographic barrier, they had another one known as the Aegean Sea. But the Aegean Sea served as both a geographic barrier early on, but also as a geographic commodity, right? So Greece is going to be bordered by this particular sea, right? The Aegean Sea is on the east, and then over on the western side is known as the Ionian Sea, right? Ionian Sea, the Ionian Sea, but it is bordered by these 2 particular bodies of water. Now, the reason why the Aegean Sea is so important, though, is because it's covered in natural harbors, and there are islands scattered all over it, right? The great thing about these natural harbors, which for any of you who don't know, which I'm sure you do because you live in Louisiana, like natural harbors are a very key component for trade and trade negotiations through ancient civilizations, because natural harbors are areas where boats can be easily docked, right? They can be easily docked and actually be easily like unloaded for commercial goods and gains, right? So also the fact that these islands are everywhere, they offer great contact in terms of trade, as in relay points for ships to resupply and things like that, right? And sometimes it can lead to war. But also, just to give you a couple other little random things, the climate in Greece is on average of about 75 degrees. It's a very nice Mediterranean climate, very good for early civilizations in terms of being able to survive harsh changes in seasonality, because there isn't as much of a seasonal variability in the climate of ancient Greece, right? And then the last, very important, very crucial key component, Greece has terrible farmland. Wait a second. I hear you, Emma Papadon, or Pompadon, Emma. So, like, I hear you, Emma. You ask a really good question, right? You're like, how the heck, why, like, I thought the Neolithic Revolution is dependent on agriculture. How is anybody starting a civilization when they only have 20% farmable land, right? And that's a great question, Emma. And honestly, out of that 20%, the only things that grow there are, like, olives, grapes, and certain types of grass, right? Like, so like that's the only things that really grow naturally in Greece that can kind of be harvested for human gain. The big thing about it, though, is this is going to force some of the earliest residents of ancient Greece to rely on trade, right? So that is very important that we understand that, right? That's how Greece is going to kind of break the mold of all those ancient civilizations, is instead of relying on farming techniques like the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians and several others, they're going to take more of like a Phoenician route, and they're going to rely much more heavily on trade. Speaking of the Phoenicians, does this now make complete connectable sense as to why the Greeks adopted a phonetic alphabet originally developed by the Phoenicians? All they just did to it was change it and add vowels? Well, yeah, it's because they relied on that trade. And the Phoenicians were some of their earliest trade partners who showed them how to develop seafaring vessels, right? So now you can kind of see how Greece was played into by all of these different civilizations and all these other different eras, right? So now we got to get into the time periods, right? So the very first time period we have to talk about is the Neolithic Era in Greece, right? That's the N on our time periods, right? When we go N, EBMMDACH, right? The N on the very front is the Neolithic Era, right? Now, the Neolithic Era is only really characterized by the development of farming, early settlements, and it's going to usually show up by most historical documentation purposes from about 6,000 to 2,900 BC, right? Now, the big thing about the Neolithic period is it's just kind of showing us that people are beginning to arrive in Greece, particularly in certain areas such as southern Peloponnese, as well as the island of Crete, which we'll get into here in a second. And it's just showing us that people are beginning to arrive. Migratory bands of people are starting to show up. Former hunter-gatherers are now creating small settlements on the Balkan Peninsula, right? Now, big things that we have found, though, are some different types of pottery, because we always, apparently, in archaeology find pots, even though it is one of my ultimate nerd jobs is to be an archaeologist. And then also we're finding religious relics as well, small forms and small tokens of art as well, which is showing us the development of people and cultures in this area, right? Then we're going to move into this period, right? From about 2900 to 2000 BC is defined as the early Bronze Age in Greece, right? So these Neolithic people, so we already just, bang, done. Neolithic time period, gone. Very, very easy. Just means the establishment of farming and some small settlements, right? So then we get into the early Bronze Age, right? Now, bronze being very key and very important. And if you don't already know this, you should go ahead and jot it down. Let's talk about what bronze is, right? Bronze is a forgeable metal, right? Forgeable metals are going to play a huge part in the development of Western civilizations and even Eastern civilizations and civilizations in totality in major effect, right? Because these forgeable metals are going to be the things that drive forward technology, drive forward trade, drive forward cultural diffusion, because they make life easier, right? Mainly due to the fact that bronze is harder than stone, holds an edge, is ductile and is malleable as well, and is actually easier to forge, right? Now, what bronze is, though, is it's actually not even a pure metal. It's an alloy. It's the mixture of two metals, copper and tin, right? Those two things mixed together. Now, this alloy creation is mainly due to the fact that smelting capabilities had not quite got up to the level of iron yet. But we'll talk about that later on when we talk about the Bronze Age collapse, right? So just so you know, we are going to start to see in 29 to about 2000 BC, we're going to see the introduction of metal bronze. And it's going to be used to create weapons, pots, armor, different other random little goods and pieces of artifacts that we have found. And it's going to serve as a major key marking point for the ancient Greeks as an introduction to technological goods that are probably coming from their trade relations, usually probably being brought to them probably by the Phoenicians. Actually, we know that there was some kind of contact with the Greeks and the Mesopotamians, because the word Mesopotamia is a Greek word, right? So again, cultural diffusion, it's very, very important, okay? Now we're getting into those first Westerners, though, right? Now we're jumping head first into the very first Western groups, right? And those being the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, right? Now, the very first Greeks weren't really Greeks like you think of them at all, right? They were the earliest form of large structure civilization that existed in the Greek sphere, right? As in within the Aegean and on the Balkan Peninsula, right? So this right here is a quick little map of the Aegean Sea. And what is this little island down here? You should know this from your map quiz. That is the island of Crete. And that is going to be the home of the Minoan people, right? Because the Minoan period is going to span from about 2000 BC to about 1500 BC, right? And we only know small, fractured little amounts about this particular civilization. However, their artifacts and their art give us a huge, great glimpse into their life, how it was structured, and different ideals of their civilization, right? And so since this was just simply an introductory flip to get your feet on the ground, we are going to stop here, right? We're going to stop here, and we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper with the Minoans later, and we're going to get further into them. We're going to talk about the Palace of Knossos and how ancient Greeks actually periodized myths to actually understand their growth way long before they ever existed. But we'll talk about that stuff later on. I hope y'all have a great evening. Y'all killed this test. I'm super proud. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Y'all have a good one.